The morning alarm echoed through the massive space station floating in the darkness between stars. Galactic Academy Station Theta 7 was home to thousands of young beings from across the galaxy, all here to learn and grow together in peace. The faculty lounge. Physical education instructor Ketha sat reviewing his daily schedule on a glowing datapad. His reptilian scales caught the soft light as he scrolled through routine notifications. New equipment delivery, maintenance schedule, student health updates, all standard fare for another peaceful day at the academy. Then something caught his eye. A transfer notification glowed brighter than the rest. New student assignment, species, human, classification, Deathworlder, origin, Sol 3, assigned to physical wellness program. Kepha's forked tongue flaked out in amusement. Deathworlder. What bureaucratic fool had made that classification error? Everyone knew that death worlds were theoretical constructs, planets so hostile that no intelligent life could possibly evolve there. Certainly no civilized species would allow their young to attend a proper educational institution. He dismissed the notification with a claw swipe and returned to his morning preparations. Probably just another soft-bodied mammalian species with an overly dramatic name for their homeworld. Meanwhile, 17-year-old Lee Jin-ho stepped off the transport shuttle onto the station's main docking bay. The artificial gravity felt strange under his feet, lighter somehow, making each step feel like he might float away. He adjusted the strap of his simple duffel bag and looked round in wonder at the incredible sight. Before him, the docking bay was enormous, with a transparent ceiling that showed the stars beyond. Dozens of different creatures moved through the space, unlike anything he had ever imagined. Tall, graceful beings that seemed to float rather than walk. Their bodies covered in what looked like living crystal. Tiny creatures no bigger than his thumb that moved in perfect synchronized groups, chirping to each other in musical tones. Gaseous beings that shifted colors like living rainbows. Communicating through patterns of light that danced across their forms, Jin-ho had been selected for something called an experimental exchange program. The officials back on Earth had been vague about the details, mentioning only that he would be studying interspecies cultural relations and that he was chosen for his adaptability and peaceful nature. His parents had been proud but worried, and honestly, Jin-ho felt the same way. He followed the directions on his academy-issued datapad through winding corridors filled with more wonders. The walls themselves seemed alive, pulsing gently with soft bioluminescent patterns. Strange plants grew in perfect geometric arrangements, their leaves shimmering with colors that had no names in any human language. Other students passed by in small groups, their conversations a mixture of musical tones, clicking sounds, and harmonious hums. Some paused to stare at him curiously, but their gazes felt more interested than hostile. Jin-ho tried to smile and nod politely, though he was not sure if his expressions translated across species. His first class was Universal Mathematics, held in a circular room where students floated at different levels round a central holographic display. The Valerian professor, her crystal shell refracting light into beautiful patterns, explained mathematical concepts that seemed to exist in dimensions Jin-ho could barely comprehend. Yet somehow, with the help of his translation device, he found himself following along. Galactic history came next, taught by an ancient Cerebrian whose massive brain case pulsed with different colors as he accessed various memories. The scope of galactic civilization was overwhelming. Thousands of species, millions of worlds, billions of years of peaceful cooperation and mutual understanding. Jin-ho learned that war was considered a primitive concept, abandoned by most civilized species eons ago. Xenolinguistics was fascinating in its own way. The professor, a being that looked like a walking tree made of light, demonstrated how different species communicated, Some used sound. Others used color. Still others used chemical signals or electromagnetic fields. The diversity was incredible. Yet somehow they all managed to understand each other through technology and patience throughout these classes. Jinho noticed that his fellow students moved with an elegant gentleness that felt almost dance-like. Their interactions were soft, flowing, harmonious. Even when they disagreed or asked questions, there was a quality of peace that permeated everything they did. As the morning progressed, Jinho began to relax. The other students seemed curious about him, but not afraid. His professors were patient and helpful, ensuring he understood the concepts despite the obvious differences in their thinking processes. Maybe this exchange program would work out after all. Then his datapad chimed with his next class assignment: Physical Wellness and Kinetic Studies, Gymnasium 7, Instructor Ketha. Jinho gathered his things and headed toward what he assumed would be some kind of gentle exercise class, probably involving meditation or light stretching. After all, these peaceful beings seemed to approach everything with such calm and harmony. He had no idea that he was about to become the most terrifying student in the academy's long and peaceful history. The gymnasium doors slid open with a soft hiss, and Jinho stepped inside, completely unaware that his next few minutes would change everything for everyone at Galactic Academy Station Theta 7. Jinho stepped into the gymnasium and stopped in amazement. The room was unlike anything he had ever seen. A massive transparent dome that seemed to stretch endlessly upward, with stars visible through the clear walls. The floor was soft and bouncy under his feet, made of some material that seemed to blow faintly with each step. The gravity here felt even lighter than in the corridors. When Jinho took a normal step forward, he nearly stumbled as his foot carried him much farther than expected. It was like walking on the moon, or moving underwater in slow motion. Round the gymnasium, his classmates were already engaged in their activities. A group of Valerian students floated in a perfect circle about 3 feet off the ground, their crystal bodies catching and reflecting the soft light as they moved in slow, graceful patterns. Their movements looked more like a beautiful dance than any kind of exercise Jinho recognized. Near the far wall, several tiny squeaker students sat in perfectly straight rows, their mouse-like bodies rising and falling in synchronized breathing patterns. The sound they made was like a gentle wind chime, musical and soothing. Each breath seemed to take them nearly 30 seconds to complete. The Nefrian students were perhaps the most mesmerizing. These gaseous beings slowly shifted through different colors, soft blues melting into gentle greens, then flowing into warm yellows. They moved like clouds drifting across the summer sky. And Jinho realized they were communicating with each other through these color changes, having some kind of conversation, too subtle and slow for him to follow. Other species he did not recognize were scattered throughout the space, all engaged in what appeared to be very gentle, very slow forms of movement. Some stretched like cats waking from a nap. Others swayed back and forth like trees in a light breeze. Everything felt peaceful, calm, and incredibly relaxed. Instructor Ketha stood at the center of the gymnasium, his tall reptilian form moving with the same flowing grace as his students. His scales were a deep green color that shifted to lighter shades as he moved, and his large golden eyes surveyed the class with obvious satisfaction. "Welcome, students," Ketha said, his voice carrying easily through the large space despite speaking barely above a whisper. "Today, we will practice kinetic coordination and cardiovascular enhancement." Several students made soft, approving sounds. A few Valerians chimed like tiny bells. The squeakers chirped in harmony. "The exercise is simple," Ketha continued. "Move around our gymnasium space, and when you encounter a classmate, gently touch them to transfer positive energy. This will elevate your respiratory systems and promote healthy circulation. Remember, the goal is harmony and gentle improvement, not strain or discomfort. Jinho raised his hand. Feeling slightly confused, "Excuse me, sir, I should probably mention that Earth's gravity is much stronger than what you have here. I'm used to more intensive physical activity. Should I do something different?" The entire class turned to look at him. There was something in their gazes that Jinho could not quite identify. Not fear exactly, but a kind of nervous curiosity, like small animals noticing a larger creature nearby. Ketha waved one clawed hand dismissively. "Young being, I am certain you will adapt quickly to our methods. This exercise has been carefully calibrated for optimal safety and benefit across all species present. Simply follow along and do your best." Jinho nodded and moved to join the other students as they began their activity. He watched for a moment, trying to understand the pattern. The other students were moving so slowly they barely seemed to be moving at all. Their idea of elevated respiration appeared to be breathing slightly faster than their normal turtle-like pace, not wanting to stand out or cause problems. Jinho decided to start with what he considered a very light warm-up jog back on Earth. This would be the kind of gentle pace he might use to jog to the corner store, barely faster than a brisk walk. Really, he began to move. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. To Jinho, he was barely jogging. To every other being in the gymnasium, he had suddenly transformed into something from their species' most ancient and terrible nightmares. His feet barely seemed to touch the ground as he moved with what appeared to be impossible, terrifying speed. In the space of 3 heartbeats, he had circled the entire enormous gymnasium while the other students had barely begun to lift themselves from their starting positions. The sound of his footsteps echoed like thunder in the peaceful space. His breathing, elevated from even this tiny amount of exercise, sounded like the roar of some great predatory beast. His heart rate, which had increased just slightly, was pumping blood through his system at a pace that registered on every sensitive alien nervous system as immediate mortal danger. Chime of morning light. One of the Valerian students released a sound that no being in the gymnasium had ever heard before. It was a harmonic shriek of pure terror that shattered to light fixtures and cracked 3 wall panels. The sound roughly translated to every species present as the same message: "Apex predator alert. The death hunter walks among us." And that was when everything went completely wrong. The moment Chime of Morning Light released a terror shriek, every peaceful instinct that had been bred into these civilized species for thousands of years suddenly screamed the same message: run. Hide. Survive. The Squeaker students reacted first. Their tiny bodies, no bigger than Earth hamsters, immediately activated emergency beacon implants that had been installed for exactly this type of crisis. The signals they sent out roughly translated to Mega Predator loose. All units respond. Students in immediate mortal danger. The sound that came from their tiny throats was like a fire alarm mixed with a car alarm, mixed with every smoke detector in a building going off at once. The high-pitched wailing filled the gymnasium and echoed through the station's corridors, alerting security forces 3 levels away. The Nephian students began flashing colors so rapidly they looked like broken disco lights. Bright red danger signals mixed with orange panic warnings and yellow distress calls. Their gaseous bodies expanded and contracted wildly as they tried to make themselves as small as possible, while still maintaining the color patterns that screamed "Help US" in their species' visual language. But it was the Valerians who provided the most dramatic response. These normally graceful, crystal-bodied beings began what could only be described as catastrophic stress molting. Their beautiful outer shells, which normally took months to grow and were shed only during major life transitions, began cracking and falling away in large chunks. The sound was like a chandelier being smashed with a hammer, repeated dozens of times as crystal pieces scattered across the gymnasium floor. Several of the other species Jinho had not yet learned to identify began their own panic responses. Some curled into tight balls and rolled away as fast as their bodies could carry them. Others released clouds of what seemed to be defensive chemicals, filling parts of the gymnasium with sweet-smelling fog. A few began making sounds that were probably calls for their parents, teachers, or tribal elders. Jinho stopped running immediately, horrified by the chaos erupting round him. "Wait," he called out, his voice carrying easily over the din. "What's wrong? Is everyone okay? Did I do something wrong?" His words, meant to be helpful and concerned, only made the situation 10 times worse to the panicking alien students. His voice sounded like the roar of an enormous predator calling to its pack. His heavy breathing from the light exercise registered as the panting of a creature that had just finished a successful hunt. Every step he took toward the distressed students sounded like thunder to their sensitive hearing organs. When Jinho tried to approach Chima Morning Light, who had fallen to the floor and was now missing half of her crystal shell, his footsteps made the entire gymnasium floor vibrate. To beings who had evolved on worlds with soft, yielding surfaces, the sound was like standing next to an earthquake. Instructor Kethva, who had been frozen in shock for several precious seconds, finally snapped into action. His reptilian reflexes kicked in as he slammed his clawed hand down on the large red emergency button mounted on the wall. Immediately, a shimmering force barrier sprang up round Jinho, trapping him in a glowing energy cage about 10 feet square. The barrier hummed with power, and Jinho could feel a slight tingling sensation when he got too close to the edges. "Security to Gymnasium 7. Kethva shouted into his communication device, his normally calm voice cracking with stress. "Code. Yellow situation, unknown threat level, possible predator species loose among students." Through the force barrier, Jinho raised his hands in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "Please, I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I was just joking. This is completely normal exercise for humans. I would never want to hurt anyone." But his protests only seemed to make things worse. The fact that he was not tired, not injured, and not showing any signs of distress after what they had witnessed only confirmed their worst fears. This creature had been toying with them. This had been nothing more than a casual warm dash-up. Within minutes, Dr. Zephany arrived with a full hazmat response team. She was an Etherian, a species that looked like a walking tree made of soft, glowing light. Her usual peaceful demeanor was replaced by urgent concern as she began scanning Jinho with increasingly sophisticated equipment. Her first readings made her pause. She adjusted her scanner and tried again. Then she called for backup equipment. Then she called for equipment she had never needed before in her entire career. "Instructor Kethva," she announced, her voice like wind chimes in a storm. "These readings cannot be correct. This student's bone density exceeds our measurement capabilities. His muscle fiber composition suggests he possesses the physical strength to tear through our strongest construction materials with minimal effort." She paused, recalibrating her equipment once more. "His cardiovascular system appears to be designed for sustained high-intensity physical activity that would cause most known species to die from cardiac failure within minutes. His reflexes test at speeds that our equipment cannot accurately measure." Jinho slumped against the force barrier, feeling more confused and sad than he had ever felt in his life. "I promise I'm not dangerous," he said quietly, on Earth. "I'm completely average. I'm not even good at sports. I play soccer with my friends, and I'm usually one of the worst players. Please, you have to believe me." The few students who had not fled the gymnasium entirely stared at him through the barrier. In their eyes, Jinho could see a mixture of terror, fascination, and something that might have been pity. What kind of nightmare world, they seemed to be thinking, could produce creatures like this as its normal inhabitants? Within an hour, every student and faculty member at Galactic Academy Station Theta 7 had received an emergency notification on their datapads. The message was simple but unprecedented. Mandatory assembly. Great Hall. All classes suspended. Priority Alpha situation. High Council of Exothan had not called a Priority Alpha assembly in over 200 years. The last time had been when a solar flare threatened the station's power systems. Students whispered nervously as they filed into the massive Great Hall, wondering what could possibly be so important. The Great Hall was the heart of the Academy, a vast circular amphitheater that could hold every being on the station. Thousands of students floated, perched, all settled into seats designed for their various body types, while faculty members gathered on the central platform. High Council of Exothana stood at the center podium, her massive cerebrian brain case pulsing with complex patterns of bioluminescent thought. She was ancient even by her species' standards, her memories reaching back to the early days of galactic civilization. The patterns on her brain showed deep concern mixed with fascination. Fellow beings, she began, her voice carrying clearly. To every corner of the hall, today we have encountered something that challenges our understanding of what is possible in our galaxy. Dr. Zephaniah will present her findings. Dr. Zephaniah activated the hall's holographic display system. A three-dimensional image of a blue and green planet appeared above the assembly, slowly rotating to show white clouds swirling over vast oceans and brown continents, students and colleagues. Dr. Zephaniah said, her tree-like form glowing brighter. As she spoke, I present to you Sol 3, the third planet of a yellow star in a distant spiral arm of our galaxy. Our databases classify this world as a Class 12 Deathworld. Gasps and chirps of disbelief echoed through the assembly. Most students had never heard the term Deathworld used seriously. It was something from ancient theoreticals and biology texts, a hypothetical category of planets so hostile that no life should be able to evolve there. Let me explain what makes this planet so extraordinary. Dr. Zephaniah continued. The hologram zoomed in to show the planet's surface. Sol 3 experiences gravitational force to 0.5 times what we consider standard throughout the galaxy. Most of our species would be crushed to death simply by standing on its surface. Isquika, student near the front, fainted and had to be carried out by her classmates. The atmosphere, Dr. Zephaniah went on, contains oxygen at concentrations that would be toxic to most galactic species. The inhabitants of this world breathe poison and collate air. The hologram showed massive storm systems sweeping across continents. The weather on Sol 3 is catastrophically violent. Wind speeds that would tear apart our strongest buildings occur regularly. Temperature variations exceed 100 degrees between seasons. The planet is struck by massive electrical discharges from the sky thousands of times per day. Several Valerian students began stress molting again, their crystal shells making tiny cracking sounds. Perhaps most remarkably, Dr. Zephaniah said, adjusting the display to show various Earth creatures, every single organism on this planet evolved with one primary purpose: to kill and eat other organisms. There are no truly peaceful species. Even the plants have developed toxins, thorns, and traps to defend themselves or capture prey. The images showed lions hunting zebras, sharks attacking seals, and eagles swooping down on small mammals, too. The peaceful species watching. These scenes looked like footage from the worst nightmares their minds could create. Now, Dr. Zephaniah said, let me tell you about the species we call humans. Jinho's image appeared in the hologram, looking completely ordinary and harmless to human eyes, but causing fresh waves of nervous chittering from the alien audience. Humans were not apex predators on their world. They were prey animals for most of their evolutionary history. They developed a hunting technique called persistence hunting, which involves chasing other creatures across vast distances until the prey literally dies from exhaustion. A human can run continuously for hours without stopping. An Ephrian student turned bright purple and had to be helped from the hall. What we witnessed in the gymnasium today, Dr. Zephaniah continued, was a human operating at approximately 10% of his physical capacity. Our scans indicate that this individual could run at his demonstrated speed for several hours without becoming seriously tired. The assembly fell completely silent except for the soft humming of the station's life support systems. Furthermore, Dr. Zephaniah said, bringing up more data, humans possess reflexes 15 times faster than galactic average, bone density that exceeds our construction materials, and muscle fibers that can generate force levels we previously thought impossible in biological systems. High Counselor Vexathano's brain case flashed deep purple, the cerebrian color for profound concern. The question before us is whether this human can safely coexist with our students, or whether we must terminate the exchange program immediately, for everyone's safety. The hall remained silent for long moments. Then, from somewhere in the back rows, a tiny voice spoke up. But he stopped when we got scared. It was Pip, one of the Squeaker students who had witnessed the gymnasium incident. Her voice was so small that the hall's audio systems had to amplify it for everyone to hear. He stopped running when he got scared, she repeated, her tiny body trembling with the effort of speaking before such a large assembly. And he tried to help chime of morning light when she fell down. Maybe Deathworlders aren't evil. Maybe they're just different. The entire assembly turned to stare at this tiny being who had just spoken the words that none of the adults had dared to say. Pip's tiny voice echoed in the silence of the great hall. Her words hung in the air like a challenge to everything the assembled beings thought they knew about predators and PR. About safety and danger, about the nature of life itself. High Counselor Vexathano's brain case pulsed with rapidly changing colors as she processed this simple observation from the Academy's smallest student. After several long moments, she spoke. The little one raises a point worth considering. She said slowly, Dr. Zephaniah, in your observations, did the human show any signs of predatory behavior beyond the physical capabilities we have discussed? Dr. Zephaniah's glowing form dimmed slightly as she considered the question. No, High Counselor. His immediate response to distress was to stop his activity and attempt to provide assistance. This is unusual behavior for a predator species. I propose, Vexathano announced, that we conduct a controlled experiment. The exchange program will continue, but with extensive modifications and safety protocols. If this human truly wishes to coexist peacefully, he must learn to adapt to our ways, and perhaps we must learn to understand his. The vote was close, but Pip's brave words had planted seeds of curiosity in minds that might otherwise have chosen fear. The Academy decided to give Jinho one more chance. The next few weeks were unlike anything the Academy had ever experienced. Jinho underwent intensive cultural sensitivity training with Dr. Zephaniah, learning to move slowly and deliberately around his fragile classmates. He practiced speaking in whispers, walking without making the floor vibrate, and controlling his breathing so it would not sound like the huffing of a hunting beast. Meanwhile, the other students attended special lectures about Deathworld evolution and the important difference between dangerous and malicious. They learned that strength did not automatically mean evil, and that beings from harsh worlds might actually be more protective of others, not less. The breakthrough came when Jinho suggested they try group activities that could work for everyone. Working with instructor Keffa, he designed a modified version of Capture the Flag that used each species' natural abilities. The Valerians could use their levitation to scout from above. The Nethrians could use their color-changing abilities to blend with the environment. The Squeakers could use their incredible hearing to detect opponents from far away. And Jinho, well, Jinho learned the most difficult skill of all: how to hold back his natural abilities while still being a useful team member. The first game was a disaster. Jinho moved too fast, spoke too loudly, and accidentally knocked over 3 Squeakers when he tried to give them a gentle high five. But he kept trying, and his classmates began to see that his mistakes came from enthusiasm, not malice. Slowly, trust began to build. Chime of Morning Light, whose crystal shell had grown back more beautiful than before, was the first to voluntarily approach Jinho during a game. Her action gave others courage to do the same. The real test came during a routine maintenance day, when the station's artificial gravity system experienced a critical failure. The gymnasium's gravity suddenly spiked to 1.2 times galactic standard, which was still less than half of Earth's gravity, but crushing for a species evolved in lighter conditions. Panic erupted as students found themselves unable to move, their delicate bodies pressed against the floor by the increased gravitational force. Several Valerians were in serious danger, their crystal shells beginning to crack under the pressure. While automated systems worked to restore normal gravity, Jinho moved into action. He lifted each struggling student with careful precision, carrying them to safety zones where emergency anti-gravity fields had been activated. His movements were controlled and gentle, but to the aliens watching, it looked like he was walking casually through conditions that would crush them flat in 15 minutes. He had evacuated the entire gymnasium and manually stabilized the gravity generator until the maintenance crew arrived. Not a single student was seriously injured after that day. Everything changed. The students who had once feared Jinho now saw him as their protector. They began to understand that his incredible strength came with incredible responsibility, and that he used both to help others rather than hurt them. 6 months later, Jinho had become a legend at the academy, but not the kind of legend anyone had expected. He was captain of the first ever mixed-species kinetic sports team, which had become the most popular activity at the academy. Students who had never exercised before were learning to push their boundaries safely. While Jinho learned patience and the art of gentle encouragement, his teammates included Chime of Morning Light, whose crystal shell now bore beautiful patterns that told the story of overcoming fear. Pip had become the team's strategic coordinator, her tiny voice now confident and clear. Even some of the Nethrians had joined, discovering that they could change colors faster when their hearts beat a little quicker. When the first transport arrived carrying new human exchange students, Jinho was there to meet them. Kim Minho looked nervous as he stepped off the shuttle, carrying his simple duffel bag just as Jinho had months before. "Welcome to Galactic Academy," Jinho said with a smile. "I know it seems scary at first, but you're going to love it here. Just remember, we're not here to be the strongest or the fastest. We're here to show them that being different doesn't mean being dangerous." As Minho walked through the corridors toward his first class, alien students waved and called out friendly greetings. The galaxy had become a little smaller, a little more connected, and a lot more interesting.